"This little thing looks so cheap," my granddaughter sneered, her words slicing through the silence like a knife. Then, laughter. Light, mocking, careless laughter. The kind that lingers long after the sound fades. And just like that, the room joined her. My son chuckled, her fiancé smirked, the others followed, like wind chimes caught in a storm of cruelty. The next morning, I sold the beach house. Yes, the very house where she'd already sent her wedding invitations. The house where she planned to walk down a flower-laced aisle as if I were nothing more than a silent sponsor, tucked neatly behind her perfect day. Sometimes, the cruelest wounds come from those who once curled their fingers around yours in trust. I never thought my own flesh and blood would look at me like I was disposable. But when gratitude was replaced with ridicule, I saw them, clearly, for the first time. If you're watching this, go ahead and hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? Because this story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming something that was always mine, my dignity. I spent 3 painstaking weeks knitting those little dolls. Each stitch was a memory, a prayer, a wound. My hands, knotted with arthritis, worked far into the night, past comfort, past logic. I had hidden something inside one of them, a diamond. Not just any diamond. The one my late husband, Franklin, had reset for our 50th anniversary. The one that had belonged to my grandmother before me. The very diamond Isla, my granddaughter, had been hinting at for months with saccharine flattery and carefully planted comments. The birthday party was held at her townhouse in Havenbrook Heights, one of those affluent cliffside neighborhoods outside Monterey, where the walls are too white and the wine flows like water. When I arrived, the doorman squinted at me like I was lost. I had to show my ID to get in, to a home I had helped pay for. That should have been my first warning. "Grandma Maggie is here," my son Daniel announced. He didn't even glance up from his phone. His tone held the same energy he used when reporting that it might rain, a mild inconvenience wrapped in stale politeness. The room reeked of designer perfume and carefully manufactured prestige. Laughter was strategic, smiles were curated, champagne flutes sparkled with bottomless insincerity. I stood there, overdressed, underappreciated, clutching a modestly wrapped box. I'd chosen the wrapping paper from a quaint little stationery shop where Isla once worked in college. She used to beam about her employee discount, I remembered. "Time for presents," sang Catherine, my daughter-in-law, tapping her glass with a manicured finger. "Isla, start with the smaller ones." And Isla's eyes locked onto mine, on the little box in my hands. I stepped forward with a smile I'd practiced that morning. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." She plucked it from my fingers with polished precision, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light like a slap across the face. A gift from Chase, her fiancé, who leaned against the fireplace like a man evaluating a merger. The room went quiet. She peeled back the paper slowly, theatrically. Inside were 2 hand-knit figures, Isla and Chase, dressed for their wedding. Isla lifted them out like she was holding damp socks. "This looks so cheap," she said, loudly, nose wrinkling. The room erupted, that horrible high-pitched tinkle of her laugh, fake as her smile. "Grandma, you do know we have a registry at Halston and Mayfair, right?" Chase chuckled, perfect for the donation bin. My ears burned, my cheeks burned, my soul burned. I opened my mouth. I wanted to explain about the diamond, the time, the meaning, the love. "But, Mom," Daniel cut in, resting a patronizing hand on my shoulder, "maybe we should talk about getting you some help with your finances. These little crafts, they suggest you've got a lot of time on your hands." My gaze swept the room, silently pleading for one kind face. One. And I found it. Lucas, my other grandson. He stood in the back with his camera, his eyes meeting mine with quiet apology. That glance almost shattered me. Almost. I left early. Their laughter followed me out like a ghost, clung to me on the elevator ride down, haunted me as I stepped back into the silence of my home. Later that night, the cold glow of my computer screen greeted me like an accomplice. In my inbox, an email from Isla, cheerful, bullet-pointed, cruel. She'd attached wedding vendor contracts for me to sign and pay for. The venue? My beach house. The one in Crescent Bay. The one Franklin and I bought 40 years ago. The one where I scattered his ashes. "We've already sent the invitations," she'd written, breezily. "The designer starts renovations next month. Your old furniture will need to go." I stared at the screen as my hands trembled. Something cracked inside me. Not a break, a calcification, a cold hardening where warmth used to live. The next morning, Daniel texted. "Mom, found a great retirement community just outside of Fairhaven. Tour set for next week. Just to look." Delete. Through my bedroom window, I watched the skyline shimmer under May sunlight. So many lives were changed in those high towers without the consent of the people beneath them. Was I now just another aging woman to be managed, shifted, forgotten? The beach house keys sat on my nightstand. I picked them up, grabbed my purse, and walked out the door, suddenly desperate to see the house again, before they wrecked it, before they stripped it of everything I loved. The drive to Crescent Bay felt longer than usual. My fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly my joints throbbed in protest. When I pulled into the driveway, a sleek black SUV was already there. I didn't recognize it. Inside, I heard voices. "The wall between the kitchen and dining room definitely coming down," a woman said. "Mrs. Whitlow won't care. She's barely here." I stepped into the doorway. There they were, Isla, Catherine, and a woman with perfect hair and a digital tablet, the designer, I presumed, standing in my kitchen. My kitchen, the one where I taught Isla to make Franklin's clam chowder when she was 9. "Actually," I said, my voice quiet but steady, "I do care." They turned as one. Catherine blinked, then smiled tightly. "Maggie, what a surprise! We were just discussing a few tiny updates for the wedding." "Taking down a load-bearing wall is not a tiny update," I replied, setting my purse on the counter. "Who approved these changes?" I asked, my voice quieter now, but heavy with something unmistakable. Authority. Isla stepped forward, her voice dipped in sugar and performative concern. "Grandma, we talked about this. Remember, last Christmas? You said we could use the house and make it perfect for the ceremony." "I said you could use it," I replied calmly. "I never agreed to demolishing it." The designer chirped in, her tone crisp, professional, and condescending all at once, as if explaining color theory to a toddler. I turned from her and walked toward the large living room window. The Pacific glittered in the distance, cool and vast. Franklin and I had saved 10 years to afford this view, this sacred, sea-salted piece of heaven. Now they wanted to paint over its soul in neutral tones. The designer followed, flipping through her tablet. "We're thinking white everywhere. Walls, fixtures, furniture, clean lines, minimal elegance, very Instagram-ready." My eyes drifted to the mantel, and my stomach twisted. The framed photo of Franklin and I from our 40th anniversary was gone. In its place sat a glossy mood board titled Coastal Luxe, Hamptons Edition. "Where's my photograph?" I asked, already knowing. Catherine didn't even blink. "Oh, we packed some of the more personal things away for safekeeping during the renovations." That night, after they left, breezing out with the same breezy entitlement they'd breezed in with, I searched the house. In the garage, wedged behind paint cans and discarded floral arrangements, I found 3 cardboard boxes stacked in a corner. Scrawled across each one in black marker, Maggie's things. Inside, the photo, Franklin's books, our anniversary album, and the dolls, the very ones I had made for Isla's birthday, tossed in like garbage. The diamond was still inside, still undiscovered. They hadn't even bothered to look. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel.
Mom, about that retirement community tour, he began, voice rehearsed like a closing argument. We need to start thinking seriously about your future. These places have wait lists. Catherine and I thought, since the beach house will mainly be used for family events anyway, maybe it makes sense to transfer it into a family trust, just for tax purposes, of course. Of course. His tone was smooth. Too smooth. It was the voice he used in court when trying to corner a witness into agreeing with something they didn't fully understand. I can't talk now, I said, and hung up. That's when I noticed it. A brochure sitting innocently on my kitchen table. It hadn't been there that morning. On the front, a cheerful slogan, Golden Cove Living, where independence meets assistance. A floor plan had been circled in red ink. Next to it, in Catherine's pristine handwriting, perfect for Mom. They were already dividing me up, sorting me into pieces, reassigning my life like estate planners flipping through a catalog, and I had been letting them. A few days later, Dr. Reyes adjusted his glasses and frowned at my chart. Your blood pressure is concerning, Margaret, he said gently. It's significantly elevated since your last visit. I almost laughed. Where could I even start? Should I mention the part where my granddaughter humiliated me in front of 24 people? Or that my son was plotting to take control of every asset I had left? Or maybe I should start with the strangers redecorating my home without even asking? Some family tension, I said vaguely. Dr. Reyes removed his stethoscope and looked me in the eye. At your age, with your medical history, stress isn't just unpleasant, it's dangerous. I've seen patients hospitalized after intense family conflicts. Don't let that happen to you. His words settled between us like lead. I had survived Franklin's death, breast cancer in my 60s, a lifetime of subtle dismissals and unspoken expectations. Was I going to let this, betrayal in designer heels and legal jargon, be the thing that finally destroyed me? I'm adjusting my approach to certain relationships, I replied carefully. That afternoon, I met Helen at our usual cafe on Hawthorne Street, our favorite little corner of Fairhaven, tucked between a used bookshop and an antique furniture store. Unlike me, Helen had never remarried after her husband passed. Men are like dessert, she once told me over tea. Wonderful treats, but not necessary for survival. She listened as I poured out the events of the last month. Her fork hovered midair when I got to the dolls. And the diamond? They didn't even find it? She asked, aghast. I shook my head. Still inside, I believe. Helen set her utensils down slowly. Margaret, this isn't just disrespect. This is a coordinated effort. They're maneuvering to control your assets. I gave a humorless laugh. Daniel mentioned a family trust. Of course he did, she muttered. Once everything's in his hands, you'll be living off your own money like it's a damn allowance. Then she leaned in, voice low. Has he asked for power of attorney yet? I nodded. 3 times, since Christmas. Don't you dare sign a thing, she said fiercely. She reached across the table and held my hand. I've watched you give and give and give to that family. Your time, your money, your heart. But what have they given you in return? The question hit me like a fist. What had they given me? Certainly not respect, not love, not even the basic kindness of being seen. They're my family, I murmured, but the words sounded weak. No, Helen said sharply. They're opportunists taking advantage of your kindness, and there is a difference. On my way home, I stopped by the old neighborhood bank Franklin and I had used since the 1980s. The safe deposit box hadn't been opened in years. Inside, our marriage certificate, birth records, and his collection of rare Liberty coins. Treasures no one else in the family even knew existed. That evening, Lupus called. Grandma, are you okay? You left the party kind of suddenly. His voice was a balm. Kind, genuine. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. I overheard Dad talking about the beach house. Are they really going ahead with renovations without your say? I felt something inside me thaw slightly. He saw what was happening. At least one person did. There seemed to be a lot of plans I wasn't consulted on, I said quietly. There was a pause. Grandma, I found something, he said. Dad left some papers in the printer at home, financial records. They're not good. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of records? Investment losses, second mortgages, credit card debt. I think they're counting on your assets to pull them out. I pulled up my online banking while he spoke. 3 login attempts, all from unknown devices, all in the last week. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place. This wasn't just about weddings and paint samples. This was desperation, dressed up as family concern. Opportunism wearing the mask of love. That night, sleep never came. I lay awake in the dark, the laughter from Isla's party echoing in my mind, the dolls, the diamond, the disrespect, and underneath it all, one rising, undeniable truth. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were planning to take everything. I couldn't stop seeing it. Isla holding the dolls by their tiny yarn heads like they were something disgusting, her lips curled in disdain, her fingers too delicate to touch what I had made with so much love. That diamond, inside, my grandmother's diamond, could have covered the entire cost of her wedding. If only she'd looked beneath the surface. But maybe it was time I stopped looking beneath the surface too. Maybe it was time I stopped searching for redeeming qualities that no longer existed. The next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed Andrew Bellamy. Franklin had introduced me to Andrew 2 years before, insisting I keep his card, just in case things ever get complicated. At the time, I'd laughed. Now, I understood. Andrew called the cafe that very afternoon. I could hear the surprise in his voice at my urgency. "Bring any financial documents you have," he said. "And Margaret, come alone." The cafe was tucked away on a narrow street in Fairhaven's old district, the kind of place with chipped tables, warm bread, and no background music. Andrew looked older than I remembered. His hair had turned nearly all white, and deeper creases carved around his eyes. But his handshake was firm, and his gaze still sharp as glass. Franklin would be deeply troubled by all of this, he said. Yes, I replied. He expected more from his son. Andrew spread out the documents Lucas had sent me, carefully adjusting his reading glasses. The investment losses are significant. Add in a second mortgage, credit card debt, Daniel's finances are underwater. And I'm the life raft? I said, softly. He nodded. Precisely. Margaret, I've seen this pattern too many times. And I'll be blunt, it rarely ends well for the parent. What would you advise? I asked, though my gut already knew the answer. Protect yourself. Immediately. He leaned forward, eyes locked with mine. Let's start with your assets. Where are they? I listed them calmly. The brownstone in Fairhaven, the beach house in Crescent Bay, my investment accounts, life insurance, pensions. He scribbled notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking for clarification. Who has access to these accounts? No one with me. Good. Keep it that way. He clicked his pen shut. And the properties? Both are in your name only? Franklin was adamant about that. He made sure. Andrew nodded with approval. He was a wise man. And the wedding? I added, nearly choking on the word. It's scheduled for September, at my beach house, without my real consent. He leaned back in his chair, considering. Well, you have options, legal options. It's your home, Margaret. You could simply refuse to host the event. My heart tightened at the thought. The drama, the accusations, the fallout. I could practically hear Dr. Reyes warning me again about my blood pressure. That would stir up a storm. Yes, Andrew agreed, but there are other approaches, more definitive ones. That word, definitive, sent a ripple down my spine. For months I had been reacting, absorbing, flinching, always a step behind, always being managed. Maybe it was time I became the one setting the course. "I'm listening," I said. Later that afternoon, I walked into my bank and requested to speak with the manager. I informed her of the suspicious activity on my accounts, those login attempts from unknown devices. She was sympathetic, swift, and serious. Within 20 minutes, I had upgraded security on every account and flagged all remote access. Back at home, I found another message from Isla, this one about floral arrangements, a final approval request for $18,000 worth of imported orchids and cascading roses. Right beside the email was a new brochure, this one from a retirement home even further from Fairhaven than the last. On the front, a sticky note, "More affordable option," written in Catherine's impossibly neat handwriting. The audacity was breathtaking. My phone rang. It was Lucas. "Grandma," he said, sounding uneasy, "Dad's meeting with your financial advisor tomorrow. He mentioned consolidating Mom's investments. Said it'd be safer that way." My stomach clenched. "Thank you for telling me," I said. After we hung up, I didn't wait. I called Andrew. "I've made my decision," I said. "I want to proceed with that definitive option we talked about." There was a pause. "Are you certain?" I looked out my window at the rooftops of Fairhaven, bathed in the soft glow of early evening. Yes, it's time I stopped being a passenger in my own life. That night, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I slept. No tossing, no middle-of-the-night pacing, just sleep. And in my dreams, Franklin appeared, standing on the beach at Crescent Bay. He didn't speak, but he nodded once, a deep, quiet nod that told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, Jennifer Langford arrived at my brownstone with her portfolio tucked neatly under her arm. Andrew had referred me to her, calling her the most discreet agent in town. "What exactly are you looking for?" she asked, laying out photos of recent properties she'd sold. "A buyer who can close quickly," I replied, "and values privacy. The Crescent Bay property." She lifted her brow. "Waterfront in that area usually takes a few months, even with demand. You know that, right?" "This situation is different." Jennifer paused, studying me. I could see the moment she understood. She leaned back in her chair, slow and deliberate. "I might know a few people who'd be interested. Private buyers, very private." "How quickly?" "With the right motivation, 45 days, maybe less." I nodded once. Perfect. That afternoon, I drove to the beach house alone. It looked just as it always had. Gray cedar shingles, worn soft from salt and wind. Wraparound porch, still creaking just slightly in the breeze. This house had seen 40 years of our lives. Franklin teaching Daniel to swim in the cove below. Lucas building elaborate sandcastles on the shore. Isla's 16th birthday bonfire, music echoing into the night. Inside, I moved from room to room, touching the walls like they were old friends I'd be saying goodbye to. In the master bedroom, I found more signs of the wedding, curtain swatches, paint samples, and a floor plan labeled Bridal Suite Concept. On my bedside table, a stack of wedding magazines had replaced my paperbacks. On the porch swing Franklin built with his own hands, I sat and listened to the ocean. It no longer sounded like peace. It sounded like a war I hadn't signed up for. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, need to discuss financial strategy. Dinner tomorrow, bringing Catherine and our advisor." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Jennifer. "I'd like to proceed with the listing, immediately." 2 days later, she called back. "I've got interested parties," she said. "A tech entrepreneur and his wife. They're offering full asking price, 40-day close, on the condition it remains completely private." "Accept it," I said without hesitation. Jennifer began arranging photography for the listing. I began packing. That evening, I returned to the beach house with a stack of cardboard boxes and a heavy heart.
I spent hours removing the items I couldn't leave behind. Photo albums, Franklin's old nautical books, the seashell lamp Isla made me in kindergarten. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battlefield, and I was done letting others claim it as theirs. Franklin's old maritime books, the small wooden box that still held some of his ashes. I packed both carefully into a canvas tote and stood for a moment in the doorway, just breathing in the familiar scent of salt and pine that always clung to the Crescent Bay house. That was when the front door creaked open. A young woman stepped in, tablet clutched against her chest. She startled the moment she saw me. "Mrs. Whitlow, we weren't expecting you." Her voice cracked with nerves. "I'm just here to measure the space for the tent placement." "There's no need," I said calmly, zipping the bag shut. "The wedding plans have changed." Her brow shot up. "Changed? But Isla hasn't said anything." "She doesn't know yet," I said, moving past her. I drove home with a strange lightness pressing against my chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was release. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I wasn't just enduring someone else's decisions. I was making my own. And that sensation, sharp, clear, electrifying, felt like stumbling upon a forgotten part of myself I didn't realize had gone missing. That night, over rosemary chicken and mashed potatoes at my brownstone, I told Lucas, "You're selling the beach house?" His fork froze in midair. "Before the wedding?" "Yes." He set his utensils down slowly. "They're going to lose their minds." "Probably," I agreed, sipping my wine. "But it's my property to sell." Lucas sat in thoughtful silence for a moment, then looked at me, really looked at me. "You know what's strange?" he said. "I think I respect you more right now than I ever have. And I've always respected you." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. Unexpected, uninvited, but welcome. "Thank you, sweetheart." He cleared his throat. "What about afterward? They're going to be furious, especially Dad." I met his gaze head on. I'm not responsible for managing their emotions. That's what I finally realized. As Lucas helped me clear the dishes, he asked the question I knew was coming. "Is this because of what Isla said about the gift?" I paused, dish in hand, considering how to answer. "It's because of what that moment revealed, how they see me, what they truly value." I turned the faucet on, watching the water spiral down the drain. "Some," I said, "can't be unlearned." Later, alone in my study, an email from Jennifer arrived.
Attached was the formal purchase offer. The closing date had been set for exactly 1 week before Isla's wedding. I clicked to sign electronically, each stroke of the mouse lighter than the last. With every signature, I felt something lift off my shoulders. Decades of accommodation, of shrinking, of staying silent for the sake of peace. Whatever storm was coming, I was ready for it. The first wave hit at 11:23 p.m. My phone buzzed and buzzed. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 7 messages from Isla. The last one, in screaming all caps, "Please tell me this isn't true." I silenced the phone and went to bed. I slept soundly for the first time in months. Morning came with a knock at the door. Daniel stood on my front steps, still in running clothes, sweat dampening the collar of his shirt. His expression was equal parts panic and fury. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded before I even said hello. "Good morning to you too," I replied, stepping aside. "Would you like coffee?" "I don't want coffee. I want an explanation. Jennifer Langford? A private sale? What were you thinking?" I poured myself a cup of coffee, added a splash of cream, stirred deliberately. I was thinking it's time to simplify my life, starting with selling my beach house before the wedding. The wedding that's supposed to happen there. My beach house, I corrected gently. Daniel ran a hand through his thinning hair. "You can't do this. We've sent invitations. Deposits have been made. The venue can be changed," I interrupted. "And I suggest you start looking for alternatives." His face twisted. "This is about the birthday party, isn't it?" Isla's comment. "She was joking, Mom. You're overreacting." I sipped my coffee slowly. The man standing in front of me may have had Franklin's eyes, but he had none of his character. "This isn't about one comment, Daniel. It's about a pattern of behavior, yours included." "What are you talking about?" The retirement community brochures, the secret financial meetings, the unauthorized attempts to access my accounts. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Those were for your benefit. You're getting older. I'm old, not incompetent. I set my mug down, and I'm certainly not senile, though I imagine that narrative would serve you well. His expression cracked. Mom, please, I'm in trouble. The Summit West project, it's collapsing. The investors, there are lawsuits looming if I don't find capital. So it was about money. Strangely, I felt calm. This isn't about my well-being, I said. It's about your survival. It's both, he insisted, but he couldn't look me in the eye. How much do you need? He gave me a number. It had too many zeros. I nodded once. The sale will close in 5 weeks. The proceeds will be secured in accounts you cannot access. You'd do this to your own family? To Isla? To me? I walked to the window, the skyline of Fairhaven glinting in the late morning sun. No, I said. You did this. You showed me, clearly and repeatedly, how little regard you have for my agency, my voice, and my place in this family. He looked wounded. That's not fair. I turned back to him. Isn't it, Daniel? Tell me, Daniel, when was the last time any of you asked me what I wanted, instead of telling me what I should do? He had no answer, just silence. Later that day, Isla showed up unannounced. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. She was still wearing yesterday's outfit. Chase is freaking out, she said, without even a hello. His parents are mortified. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? The old version of me, the one who swallowed her feelings for harmony's sake, might have reached for her hand, might have apologized, might have tried to fix what wasn't hers to fix. But that woman was gone. Probably as bad as I looked, I said, when you mocked my gift in front of a room full of people. Isla flinched. That was different. I was just being honest. So am I replied. The house is being sold.
The wedding needs a new venue. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. But why? Why would you do this to me? I looked at her then, my granddaughter, raised in privilege, blind to anything but her curated version of reality, and I realized she truly had no idea what she'd done. I'm not doing anything to you, Isla, I said softly. I'm doing something for myself. She stormed out in a flurry of designer fabric and wounded pride, slamming the front door behind her like a punctuation mark she thought would make a difference. It didn't. I didn't feel vindicated, not triumphant, just steady. For the first time in decades, I was living by my own compass, no longer tethered to their expectations, no longer shrinking myself to preserve their comfort. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. Later that evening, my doorbell rang again. When I opened it, I found Chase standing there, Isla's fiancé, looking uncharacteristically unsure of himself. He held his car keys in one hand and a look of mild regret in the other. "Mrs. Whitlow," he said, almost stiffly, "I was hoping to speak with you, privately, without anyone else." I stepped aside, curious. We sat in the sitting room. He didn't touch the tea I offered. His posture was still, but his eyes kept drifting toward the floor. "I wanted to apologize," he began, "for laughing at your gift. It was disrespectful. I'm sorry." I studied him. I searched for performance, for manipulation, for the self-interest that usually hummed beneath his polished exterior, but it wasn't there, not tonight. "Why now?" I asked quietly. Chase looked down at his expensive shoes, the laces neatly tied. "Because I'm starting to see things differently. The way everyone's reacting to your decision, it's opened my eyes. I think I was blind to what this family really is." For the first time, I glimpsed something almost tender in him, a flicker of doubt, of awareness, of conscience. "Careful observation is an undervalued skill," I said. He nodded and stood to leave. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Whitlow, I think I understand why you're doing this." After he left, I sat by the window and called Andrew Bellamy. "The sale's still on track?" I asked. "Yes," he confirmed. "No delays on our end." Whatever emotional tempests were swirling in my family, the course was set. My feet were planted firmly now. 3 weeks before the planned closing, Jennifer Langford called. "The buyers want to accelerate," she said. "They're offering an extra $50,000 if we can close within 10 days. I hesitated only briefly. "Tell them yes." That would mean the deal would finalize 3 weeks before Isla's wedding. I could already picture the chaos that would follow, but I didn't flinch. I had come too far to blink now. That evening, I invited Lucas for dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and buttered carrots. The meal he'd loved since he was a boy. "The sale is happening sooner," I told him as he reached for his second helping. He looked up. "Next week?" I nodded. "That's decisive," he said, approvingly. "It feels right." I smiled at him. "You're the only one I've told." "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who sees me as a person, not a resource." Lucas pushed his glasses up his nose, a small, familiar motion so reminiscent of Franklin that it stole my breath for a second. "They're planning something, you know," he said. "Dad, Catherine, Isla. An intervention. They think you're having a breakdown." I nearly laughed out loud. "Of course they do," I said. "It's easier to believe I've lost my mind than to accept I'm finally making choices they can't control." "What will you do?" "Stand my ground." Later that night, after Lucas left, my phone buzzed. "Family dinner, tomorrow, 7 p.m., our place. Important matters to discuss. Daniel." The trap was being laid. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there." Then I called Andrew. "They're planning to challenge my capacity," I told him, "to paint me as unstable, maybe even build a case."
Are you sure you want to walk into that? He asked, concerned. Absolutely. Running would only support their story. The next evening, I dressed with meticulous care. A navy suit Franklin had always admired, pearl earrings, light makeup. I didn't look frail. I looked composed, grounded, capable. The kind of woman you don't push. Daniel's house in Westridge was lit up like a stage. Through the window, I could already see the players assembling. Daniel, pacing. Catherine, rearranging hors d'oeuvres no one would eat. Isla sitting rigidly, eyes damp but practiced. Only Lucas stood apart, clearly uncomfortable, already out of place in the performance unfolding. I rang the bell. Daniel opened the door with a smile that didn't quite meet his eyes. "Mom, we've been so worried. Thank you for coming." I stepped inside. On the coffee table sat brochures from retirement homes, business cards from elder law attorneys, and, most telling, blank power of attorney documents. Catherine stepped forward, her voice soaked in artificial warmth. "We're here because we love you." "Are you?" I set my purse down slowly. "How interesting." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, we're concerned. Your recent decisions, well, they seem impulsive. Maybe even self-destructive." "You mean selling my own property?" "Exactly," Isla said, her voice rising. 3 weeks before my wedding? It's cruel and completely irrational." I looked around the room, at these people who claimed to love me while actively working to erase my autonomy. "I disagree," I said. "It makes perfect sense. Why would I host a ceremony in a place where I'm not respected?" Daniel and Catherine exchanged tight glances. "Mom," he tried again, "stress and age can affect judgment. We're simply suggesting protections." "Protections for whom, Daniel? Me or your financial interests?" The room went still. In the corner, Lucas tried and failed to hide a smile. "I know about the failed development," I said evenly, "the second mortgage, the credit card debt, the attempted access to my accounts." Daniel's face went pale. "Who told you?" "Does it matter?" I said. "What matters is that you tried to manipulate me instead of asking for help." Catherine stepped forward. "Margaret, you're clearly confused." "I've never been clearer," I said, cutting her off. "The house will be sold next week. The proceeds will remain under my control. And this little intervention only confirms I've made the right choice." I picked up my purse. "I've scheduled appointments with my physician and my attorney tomorrow. Both will document my full competency in case any of you are considering a legal challenge." I turned to leave. Wait, Isla cried, voice cracking. What about my wedding? I paused at the door, looked back once. What about my dignity? The silence that followed me out was louder than any screaming match could have ever been. The closing day arrived with a breeze and sunlight that seemed pulled from a postcard, the kind of day where the house would have glowed with life. Instead, it was a goodbye. Andrew sat across from me in his office as I signed the last document. He said nothing, only nodded with quiet approval. "Congratulations," he said gently. "It's done." It was, and I felt it, not like a loss, but a release. 40 decades of memory, grief, joy, and sacrifice, officially mine again, not because I kept the house, but because I chose to let it go. The wire transfer should be finalized by day's end, Andrew said. I nodded, the finality of it settling deep in my bones. I felt no triumph, only a strange blend of sorrow and freedom. 40 years of memories now belonged to someone else. But my future? That remained firmly in my own hands. As we stepped out of his office, Andrew hesitated at the door. "Margaret, have you thought about where you'll be living long-term?" "I have, actually," I said, surprise at his surprise. "I'm not with plans, Andrew." That evening, Lucas came over for dinner. After dessert, I handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he asked, opening it. Inside, a check made out in his name. "A gift," I said, "for your photography business." His eyes widened as he read the amount. "Grandma, this is too much. I can't accept." "You can," I interrupted, "and you will." I reached across the table, resting my hand on his. "Franklin always said you had an artist's eye. He would have wanted to support your passion." Lucas blinked rapidly. "Does Dad know?" "No, and it's not his business." I sipped my tea. "You were the only one who saw me, Lucas, the only one who bothered to look beneath the surface." Later that night, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. The Whitlow grapevine had clearly caught wind of the sale. Daniel's voicemail was clipped and corporate. "Mother, I'm disappointed you proceeded with this reckless decision. We need to discuss damage control, immediately." Catherine's message was layered in martyrdom. "Margaret, I hope you realize what you've done to this family. Isla is devastated." Isla herself sent 16 increasingly frantic messages, climaxing in, "You've ruined my life and it's all your fault." I silenced the phone and went to bed in peace. The next morning, I met a new real estate agent, this one specializing in properties tailored to active seniors. We toured 3 condominiums in well-kept high-rises, each with security, modern amenities, and easy access to the cultural treasures I'd neglected for too long. "This one has the best view," the agent said, as we stood in a 15th-floor corner unit in Cambridge. Through the tall windows, the Charles River sparkled in the sunlight. "And it's very secure, private elevator access only." The space was open, filled with light, a stark contrast to the heavy wood and historical hush of my old home. "It's perfect," I said. By that afternoon, I'd made an offer. By evening, it was accepted. At 8:04 p.m., the doorbell rang. Daniel. He didn't wait for an invitation, just stepped inside, his expression stormy. "You're buying property now, without even consulting me, after everything that's happened?" I remained calm. "I wasn't aware I needed your approval to choose where I live." "That's not—" He paused, collecting himself. "Mother, I'm trying to help you." "No, Daniel, you're trying to control me. There's a difference." He began pacing, agitation vibrating off him like static. "This family is in crisis, Mother. Isla's wedding is in shambles. Her fiancé's family is threatening to pull out entirely." "Those sound like Isla and Chase's problems to solve," I said flatly. His voice rose. "How can you be so cold? This is your granddaughter's future." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, and wondered how we'd arrived at this point. "Daniel, when did my existence become solely about propping up everyone else's dreams, regardless of my own?" "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I cut in. "You planned to move me to a retirement home without my consent. You tried to access my accounts. You orchestrated an intervention based on false concerns about my mental capacity, all because I made choices you didn't like. He had no answer. I close on the new property in 3 weeks, I said quietly. I'll be downsizing. You and Catherine are welcome to come choose any furniture or heirlooms you'd like before I arrange for an estate sale. You're really going through with all this? It's not a question, Daniel. Yes, I really am. After he left, I stood by the window, watching the Boston skyline shimmer under the city lights. I felt a strange, heavy stillness. Not loneliness exactly, but a quiet truth. I hadn't lost my family. I'd simply come to see they were never truly mine, not in the way I had hoped. My phone chimed. Just heard about Cambridge. Proud of you, Grandma. Need help packing? Lucas. At least one bridge still stood, and for now, that was enough. Over coffee in a sun-drenched cafe near Boston Common, Lucas delivered the news. Chase called off the engagement.
September had arrived, oddly warm, the park still buzzing with green life and distant laughter. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. For all her cruelty, I hadn't wanted Isla to endure this particular kind of pain. "His parents got spooked," Lucas said, stirring his coffee. "They blamed family instability. That was their phrase." He sighed. "She hasn't left her apartment in 3 days. She's devastated." A flicker of guilt stirred in me, faint, quickly replaced by a stronger current of resolve. "This is unfortunate," I said, "but not exactly unpredictable." "Dad blames you," Lucas added quietly. "Of course he does," I replied. "It's easier than examining his own role in all of this." Lucas hesitated. "Would you consider talking to Isla? Not to apologize, but I think she's really struggling." "I'll think about it," I said. Later that day, Helen called. "I ran into Isla at Bloomingdale's," she said, her voice unusually direct. "She was returning wedding gifts." I stayed silent. "She looked awful, Margaret. I mean, really awful, like she hadn't slept in days." "Lucas mentioned the breakup's been hard," I murmured. "It's more than that. She looked broken, not just sad." Helen paused. "When she saw me, she burst into tears, right there in Housewares." That image struck me harder than I expected. Isla, sobbing among designer cookware she'd no longer need. After the call, I sat in my study, staring at an old photo. Isla as a toddler, clinging to my hand on the beach near the old house. Back when love felt simple, before they learned to measure it in dollars and demands. Isla at 10, beaming as she held up her science fair ribbon. Isla at 16, rolling her eyes but smiling anyway, as I told her one of my old stories. When had she changed? When had the curious, affectionate child become the entitled woman who could humiliate her grandmother in front of dozens without hesitation? And, if I was honest, was I any better, wielding my power, financial and otherwise, to make a point in the most public way imaginable? These thoughts followed me like shadows as I packed books into boxes, preparing to leave the Boston house behind. The Cambridge condominium would be ready in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, this home, heavy with history, was already drawing interest, even though I hadn't listed it yet. My phone rang again. Daniel. "Mom, I know things have been strained," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But I'm asking you, both professionally and personally, to call Isla. She's in a very dark place." "Is she getting help?" His silence was revealing. "She refuses to see a therapist. Says it would feel like admitting failure. So like our family, prioritizing appearances over actual healing." "I'll reach out," I told him. That evening, I sent Isla a message. "Would you like to meet for coffee tomorrow?" Her reply was immediate. "Why, so you can gloat?" "No, so I can listen." After a long pause, "Fine, Café Solstice on Hanover, 2 p.m. I arrived early, choosing a quiet table in the corner. Isla entered at exactly 2 o'clock, dark sunglasses covering half her face despite the overcast sky. When she removed them, the truth was written all over her.
red-rimmed eyes, a pale and drawn face. Helen hadn't exaggerated. "You look awful," I blurted before I could soften the words. To my surprise, she laughed, bitter and brittle. "Thanks, Grandma. Always the straight shooter." "I'm sorry. That was unkind, but not untrue." She stirred her untouched coffee. "Chase is already dating someone new," she said flatly. "Instagram official, 3 weeks after canceling our wedding." I winced. "I'm truly sorry to hear that." "Are you?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You sold the house where we were supposed to get married. You knew what would happen." "I knew there would be consequences," I admitted. "I didn't anticipate this one."
Why did you do it? Was humiliating me worth destroying your relationship with the entire family? The question hovered between us, raw and demanding. I didn't flinch. How did you feel when you opened my gift at the party? She frowned. I don't see what that has to do with. Please answer, Isla. She exhaled sharply. Fine, I thought it looked cheap, like something homemade. I was embarrassed. Everyone else gave me designer things. And did you think about how I might feel being mocked publicly? A flush crept across her cheeks. No, not then, not until later. That's why I sold the house, I said softly, because I realized it had become more important to you, all of you, than I was. Isla's eyes welled up. So you destroyed everything just to make a point? No. I sold my property because it stopped feeling like mine. It became a symbol of how little anyone saw me. As a person, I was just a resource, an obstacle, a checkbook with a pulse. For a long moment, she said nothing, but something shifted in her silence, a softening, a willingness to hear. "Did you know," I said gently, "that one of those knitted dolls had a diamond sewn inside?" She stared at me, stunned. "What?" "My grandmother's engagement diamond. I had it reset for you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I threw them away," she whispered. "That night, I threw them in the trash." The finality of it hit us both. The diamond, the gesture, the innocence of the past. "I think we've all thrown away things more valuable than we realized," I murmured. We didn't part with forgiveness, but something had cracked. The first fracture in a wall built from years of silence, assumption, and unmet expectations. 2 weeks later, my Cambridge condominium already felt like home. Light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warmth onto hardwood floors. Gone were the creaking stairs and shadowed rooms of the past. Security, privacy, clarity. I invited Lucas for dinner. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a small gift. "Housewarming," he said, grinning as he handed it over. "Nothing fancy." Inside, I found a framed photo. The beach house at sunset, waves catching golden light, windows glowing softly from within. "It's beautiful," I said, touched. "When did you take this?" "Last summer." I always thought it captured something essential about the place. He looked around, thoughtful. "You seem lighter here, Grandma, less burdened." "I am lighter." I hung the photo on a wall bathed in morning sun. Letting go, I realized, often feels like loss, but sometimes it's the only way to reclaim space for joy. Over dinner, Lucas shared updates. His photography business was gaining real traction. 2 gallery shows lined up for winter. "The investment is already making a difference," he admitted. "Dad doesn't know yet about the money or the career shift." "Sometimes the right moment never comes," I said. "Sometimes we have to create it." Later that evening, alone in my living room, I sat near the window, watching the city lights shimmer on the Charles River. There were still fractures, still grief, but there was light now too. And for the first time in years, I truly felt it was mine. My phone stayed silent. No frantic messages from Isla, no controlling voicemails from Daniel, no guilt-laced texts from Catherine. The quiet was disorienting, but also clarifying. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's emotional cleanup crew. I simply was, alone, whole. The next morning, I went in for my regular checkup with Dr. Reyes. "Your numbers are significantly improved," he said, flipping through the chart. "Blood pressure down, stress markers noticeably reduced." "I've simplified my life," I replied. Turns out that's better medicine than most prescriptions. He smiled. How are things with your family? Complicated, distant, but truthful, finally. He nodded slowly. And how does that feel? I thought about it, like someone removing a splinter that had been festering beneath the skin for decades. Painful, I said, but necessary. Later that week, I heard an unexpected knock. Catherine stood at the door, dressed in her usual polished style, tailored coat, silk scarf, diamond studs, but her expression was uncertain, guarded, vulnerable. "Your new place is lovely," she said softly. "Very you." "Thank you. Would you like some tea?" We sat on the sofa in stiff silence until she finally exhaled. "Margaret, I owe you an apology." Of all the things I'd imagined her saying, that was not on the list. "Daniel and I are separating," she continued, before I could respond. "It's been coming for years. The financial stress just tore off the veneer." "I'm sorry." She gave a tired smile. "Are you? We haven't been fair to you." "Family's complicated," I said simply. Catherine looked down at her manicured hands. "When you sold the beach house, it forced everything into the open. Daniel's debts, my marriage, Isla's crumbling relationship. It was like a curtain got yanked back, and none of us were ready for the view. Sometimes one truth exposes all the others." She nodded. "I need you to know, the brochures about retirement homes, the conversations about power of attorney, those were my doing, not Daniel's." I blinked, surprised. "Why tell me now?" "Because I've been thinking about aging, about my own mother, and I treat her the same way I treated you, as someone to manage." She looked up, eyes glossy. "It's not a flattering realization." At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, Margaret, I think you did the right thing. It just took me a while to see it." That night, I called Helen. "People can surprise you," she said, amused, "sometimes even in good ways." "It doesn't feel like an ending," I admitted, "more like something beginning." "Not a restoration of what was," Helen said. "That's long gone. But maybe the start of something more honest." After we hung up, I sat alone, thinking of the lost diamond, the knitted dolls, all the things that had seemed disposable until they were gone. Maybe families were like that too, fragile, breakable, but also, maybe, rebuildable. Not the same, maybe better. One chilly morning in late October, I received an email from Daniel. The subject line was only one word: coffee? We met at a neutral cafe, halfway between our homes. He arrived dressed in jeans and a sweater, a far cry from his usual starched suit. He looked older, tired. "You look well, Mom," he said, after ordering for both of us. "The new place suits you." "It does." I studied his face, creased with new lines I hadn't noticed before. "Catherine told me about the separation." He nodded. "It's been overdue for years. The debt just accelerated the collapse." "I'm sorry." "For the pain, yes. For ending something that wasn't working, not really." He smiled faintly. "Dad would have admired how you handled everything." The mention of Robert caught me off guard. "I'd like to think so," I said quietly. The coffee arrived. Daniel stirred in cream, slowly. "I had to file for personal bankruptcy," he said flatly. "The Oak Ridge deal was worse than I let on. More investors, bigger losses." I figured as much. "You always did see straight through me," he admitted. Then, after a pause, "I should have just asked for help." "Yes, Daniel, you should have." "If I had been honest, would you have helped?" I considered that. "I would have listened, maybe helped, with conditions, but we'll never know now, will we?" He nodded. The weight of everything unspoken hung between us. "I've taken a job," he finally said, "legal aid nonprofit. The pay's nothing, but it's good work, real work." That's a significant shift. He smiled, a necessary one.
I'm staying with Lucas for now, he added. He's been incredibly kind. He's a good man, better than either of us deserves. He chuckled. Apparently, he's been running that photography business for years behind the scenes. Who knew? I did, I said, sipping my coffee. Daniel looked at me carefully, perhaps sensing something he wouldn't name. Mom, he said slowly, I'm not here for money, or forgiveness, or a reset button. I needed to tell you I know I handled this all terribly. I let that settle. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Thank you for saying that. I don't expect things to go back, he said. They probably can't. No, I agreed, but maybe they don't need to. And for the first time in years, we sat in the same space, not as adversaries, not as assets to be claimed or judged, but simply as two flawed, aging humans trying to begin again. Maybe it wasn't healing, not yet, but it was a start. Too much has happened, Daniel said softly. He paused, eyes lowered. But I'd like to start something new, if you're willing. I studied my son, this imperfect, weathered man who had caused me immeasurable pain, yet who still, against all odds, remained my child. I'm willing to try, I said at last, but with clear boundaries. Relief swept across his face. That's more than fair. As we stepped outside, crisp leaves spun around our ankles. Daniel hesitated. Have you spoken to Isla lately? Not since our coffee last month. He nodded. She's been through a storm. The canceled wedding, Chase's new relationship, very public, very fast, and then losing her job. It's been nonstop. Is she finally getting help? A small smile. Yes, Lucas convinced her to talk to someone. It's making a difference. The wind stirred as we said goodbye, and Daniel, awkwardly, but with effort, stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. I let him. It had been years since he'd reached for me like that. I miss the beach house, he murmured. Not for its value or the wedding plans, just the memories. I do too, I admitted. But memories don't need deeds or keys to endure. Back at the condo, I pulled down an old album from the top shelf. Page after page, Donald and Isla as children on the sand, Robert grilling on the deck, birthday cakes, driftwood sculptures, Thanksgiving pies cooling by the window. I carefully selected several of those images. Daniel building his first sandcastle, Isla flying her favorite kite, Robert hoisting them onto his shoulders, and had them professionally framed. I shipped them to Daniel's new apartment with a handwritten note. The most valuable things we carry aren't assets. They're moments, and they live inside us. That evening, I received a message from Isla. Found something I think belongs to you. Can I stop by tomorrow? She arrived the next afternoon with a small paper bag clutched in both hands. She looked steadier, some color in her cheeks, shoulders less slumped, still fragile, but healing. This place suits you, she said, stepping inside. Warm, bright. Thank you, I replied. Would you like the tour? After a gentle walkthrough, we settled into the living room, where autumn light streamed across the hardwood floor. I found these, Isla said, opening the bag. She pulled out the knitted dolls I'd made for her birthday, carefully, reverently, as if they were relics. I thought they were gone, I whispered. I almost threw them away that night, she admitted, but something stopped me. A pause. You said there was a diamond. Yes, hidden in the heart of the girl doll. It belonged to my grandmother. With careful fingers, Isla examined the stitches until she found the nearly invisible opening. She gasped softly as the stone emerged. A brilliant cut diamond, 1 carat, passed down for 3 generations. It's beautiful, she whispered. All this time. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't obvious, I said quietly. Sometimes you have to look deeper. Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't deserve this." "It was a gift," I replied, "and gifts aren't about deserving." She placed the diamond and dolls on the coffee table between us.
"I can't take them. Not after everything. But I needed you to know. I found it. I see now what you were trying to give me." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I'm in therapy," she said quietly, "and it's helping. I'm seeing things more clearly. About you, about myself. I'm glad. I'm not ready to talk about everything yet. I'll be here when you are." After she left, I sat with the dolls in my lap. The fabric was faded, the stuffing uneven from storage, but they were still whole. The diamond glinted beside them, catching slants of afternoon light. Some gifts, once dismissed, can't be given again the same way. But perhaps new ones could. I returned the diamond to its hiding place and gently stitched the doll closed. Some treasures aren't meant to be flaunted. They wait quietly for the right moment, or the right heart. Exactly 1 year after Isla's birthday unraveling, I hosted a small gathering in my Cambridge condo. Only those who mattered came. Lucas arrived first, hand in hand with his partner Emily. Daniel came alone, but lighter somehow. Helen and Marcus brought wine and laughter. And Isla, last to arrive, entered with a bouquet of russet roses and golden asters. "Happy housewarming," she said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Belated but sincere. The space no longer resembled the brownstone I'd left behind. Gone were the heavy curtains and dark oil paintings. In their place, clean lines, soft textures, bursts of color. Several of Lucas's photographs lined the walls, especially the one of the beach house at sunset. Dinner flowed effortlessly. Daniel shared stories of his legal aid work, finally free from performative posturing. Lucas talked about his gallery opening in New York. Isla, more grounded than I'd seen her in years, announced her return to graduate school. "Art history," she said, her voice steady. "What I loved before everything else pulled me away." After dessert, Lucas raised his glass. "To Gran Margaret," he said, "for reminding us that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." And that sometimes, Isla added, real value isn't obvious at first glance. She met my eyes as she said it, her voice warm with something I hadn't felt from her in years: respect. Later, as the guests trickled out into the October night, Isla lingered behind. She found me in the living room, where the last light of the evening curled across the floor. "Gran," she said quietly, "there's something I haven't told you yet." "I have something for you," Isla said softly, reaching into her handbag and retrieving a small velvet box. Inside was a pendant, simple, elegant, set in smooth silver with a single diamond. My diamond. "I know you said I could keep it," she added quickly, "but I had it reset. For you. I think you should wear it now, not save it for someone else's future." I lifted the pendant gently, turning it so the stone caught the amber glow of the living room lamp. It shimmered, refracting soft halos across my palm. "It's beautiful," I murmured. "I've been thinking a lot about that day," Isla continued, her voice more fragile now. "Why I reacted the way I did. My therapist helped me understand. I've spent most of my life chasing validation through image, through status, through stuff. I never really learned to recognize what's real." I nodded, my voice quiet. "We pass down what we know. Your parents raised you to value how things look, not what they mean." "Yes," she said, "but I'm not a child anymore. I'm responsible now for what I value." Her fingers brushed the pendant where it rested in mine. "When you sold the summer house, I was furious, but it forced me to look in the mirror, to ask whether I even wanted what I was clinging to, or if I just thought I was supposed to want it." "And what do you want now?" I asked. She smiled, not the polished, practiced smile I'd seen for years, but something unguarded, whole. "I want to make something meaningful. To get good at something because I love it. I want relationships that are rooted in respect, not what I can offer or leverage." I touched her hand gently. "Those are beautiful goals." "They're your goals," she said with quiet conviction. "I just never noticed until now."
As guests gathered coats and said their goodbyes, Daniel stayed behind, stacking dishes despite my half-hearted objections. "Let me do this one small thing," he said, flashing a crooked smile. "Call it symbolic restitution." In the kitchen, away from the hum of parting conversations, his voice grew serious. "I visited the new owners of the lake cottage last month. That caught me off guard." "You did? Why?" "Closure, maybe, or penance." He shrugged. "They've changed everything. New paint, new furniture, a completely different garden. It didn't feel like ours anymore." "Did that upset you?" "Oddly, no. It helped me realize I wasn't grieving the place. I was grieving what it stood for. Family, continuity, belonging. And I almost lost it all chasing financial security." I took the damp plate from his hands, drying it slowly. "We've all made our missteps, Daniel. Some of us just had louder ones." He chuckled softly. "Well, I'm learning, painfully, but I'm learning." After the last hug, the final goodbye, and the gentle closing of the front door, I stepped out onto the balcony. Below me, the Charles River glittered with reflections, street lamps, passing headlights, city life humming in quiet brilliance. The pendant sat cool against my collarbone, the diamond like a silent sentinel resting just above my heart. The lake house was gone, so was the brownstone. The version of my family I once clung to, perfect in photos, broken underneath, had shattered. But what remained had been sifted, examined, and rebuilt. Not the same, not perfect, but truer. In the glass door's reflection, I saw myself. Not the passive grandmother who sewed hidden treasures into toys, not the woman who sold a house just to be heard. The person staring back stood tall, eyes clear, unafraid of solitude or silence. I had discovered at 79 that boundaries weren't barriers, they were lifelines, that dignity couldn't be handed to you through inheritance or demanded by legacy. It had to be claimed. I touched the diamond. Once discarded, now reborn. Like me. Helen had said it best when I'd called her about Isla's gift. You needed to wear that stone, not bury it for some hypothetical future. It belongs on you now. She was right. The time for suppressing my needs, dulling my edges, dimming my presence, was over. Across the river, I could see the glow of Beacon Hill. Somewhere in that tangle of rooftops was the home I'd once maintained for everyone but myself. Beyond that, the cottage rested under a different sky, hosting new laughter, new grief, new life. And here, in this unexpected, hard-won chapter, I was finally writing my own story, not as a supporting character in someone else's script, but as the lead in my own tale. The diamond caught a final glint of moonlight as I turned back inside. Not everything precious had been lost in the storms of the past year. Some treasures had been reclaimed. Others, more powerful, more enduring, had only just been discovered. It wasn't the ending I had prepared for. It was better. It was mine. This story is a reminder that dignity is not a gift others give us. It's something we must fiercely protect for ourselves. Margaret Whitelow spent decades giving, supporting, and staying silent for the sake of peace. But when her family crossed a line, mocking her love, undermining her autonomy, and scheming behind her back, she didn't lash out. She made a choice, a powerful, irreversible choice to reclaim her voice, her legacy, and her life. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about drawing boundaries, choosing truth over performance, and realizing that sometimes the most radical act of love is choosing yourself. If this journey moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own worth, please like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, where are you watching from? What part of this story spoke to your heart? Your support means the world, and your presence here helps amplify stories that often go unheard. Together, we're building a space for truth, healing, and empowerment, one story at a time.